Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Gearing Up for Success Post-COVID, Peak and Brexit. And I say post these things, but actually we're still in the midst of the pandemic and we're still experiencing an awful lot of Brexit uncertainty, confusion and difficulties. Now, I'm thrilled to be joined today by Bobbie and David from GFS. So welcome, guys. Would you like to introduce yourself? Ladies first. Bobbie, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be back with you and the Tame Bay members. So hello, everyone. I also want to give a big shout out to some of our GFS customers that I know are listening today. So hello, GFS customers. My name is Bobbie Ttooulis. I am a marketing director for GFS and also a member of the board. If you don't know us, then GFS started out some 20 years ago. We were the UK's first, and now we're the largest provider of global multi-carrier services. In fact, Chris, it was our 20th birthday only last week.
Oh, happy birthday. Happy 20th.
Thank you. Yeah.
And David, hello.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Just a background. I've been with GFS for 3 years now. Director of Account Management at GFS. I look after a team of 9 account managers, and our role is true carrier management. So the team of account managers look after every touch point with customers, from the IT and IT integration to operations to customer service to billing, to really provide the one-stop shop support to our customers.
Brilliant. Look, before we actually get into the webinar, I'm afraid you guys have got a bit of a hard time today because I've been gathering up questions from our audience and there's so much stuff going on and a lot of it is based around Brexit. Between Christmas and New Year, we saw sellers suddenly worried that the deal's coming or is the deal not coming? What do we do in Northern Ireland? Because although it's part of Great Britain, even that's changed. And I actually saw between Christmas and New Year, sellers say, I'm going to block Northern Ireland because I don't know what paperwork I'm going to need. And then we got into the new year and people started shipping stuff to the EU. And a lot of carriers, in fact, just about every carrier shut down between Christmas and New Year because obviously when, due to the pandemic, not Brexit, the French closed the border, nothing was shipping, all the carriers stopped accepting parcels. Then when they started up again, there seems to be some problems with paperwork. And suddenly they stopped again, or some of them stopped and actually returned parcels to retailers. And there we're seeing other carriers saying, well, we're okay with shipping, but there's certain products which there's a lot of paperwork on that we're not really sure of, cosmetics being one of them. And they're saying, okay, you can pretty much ship everything except for cosmetics. So there's an awful lot of disruption going on. And our listeners really want to know basic, straightforward advice on what they can do and how they can hope. So I'd like to cover that today. But to start with, let's just take a step back and look back. David, 2020, how was e-commerce actually impacted by COVID and Peak? Before we get to Brexit, let's concentrate on the things that happened last year. What did you see in the industry, and how did the industry actually cope?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Chris. I think everything you said in your introduction there, I'd agree. I think it's been a really challenging time for retailers, for carriers, and a complete lack of confusion. I think looking back at last year, for reasons known to everyone, it was a very difficult and very challenging year. In terms of e-commerce specifically, I think that the pandemic sort of supercharged e-commerce delivery by about 5 years in the growth plans that the carriers and retailers had. I think that's probably the short answer. I think to reflect over last year, and it's interesting because this time last year we were reflecting on Peak 2019 and starting to put together our masterclass for customers around how to cope with Peak 2020. And I think at that time we talked Peak 2020 in terms of a little bit of a boost in summer as the summer season sales happened June, July, but more notably in November and December. I don't think any of us expected at the end of March would be hitting peak volumes instantly. And I think it's easy to forget just how tough a time it was in March, as the lockdown was announced on the 23rd. You know, we had a small number of customers confused around the rules and regulations, what constituted an essential business. Some of those customers decided to close shop. But what we saw very, very quickly in those coming days was probably at the time we'd categorise it as panic buying. So we saw supplies of pet food, of cleaning products really surging in volume. And what became clear very quickly was that volume was about to be supercharged. And even some of those carriers that had initially closed for that first week suddenly started to realise they were allowed to trade under government regulations, did start to come back and did hit high volumes as well. And I think as well, what then happened through April is as people became more comfortable with the furlough scheme, we then started to see a switch to products like DIY, like home improvement. Alcohol as well became a really popular product just as people were more at home. And again,
well, the pubs were shut.
The pubs were shut, yeah. But again, I think everyone, I think this is where the key became, as it came into the summer and a few nice days, that traditional summer season, the outdoor garden furniture, again, excelled like never before. And what we saw across the industry is parcel volume in June that was beating the volume we'd seen in 2019 on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So completely unprecedented, unrecognised. Then I guess the challenges we went through summer, and the carriers have adapted fantastically well to all the safe distancing regulations that were in place. But we then, as we got to the back end of summer, was really starting to wonder, how would we actually cope with a peak on peak? You know, traditionally, November, December is perhaps a 35% uplift on the summer months. But we were typically, depending which carrier you're looking at, ranging between 40 to 60% up in 2020 on the 2019 volumes as well. So a huge jump in the carrier numbers. I think it's clear that, you know, despite those concerns, that everybody rose to challenge, that the retailers managed to pick, pack and dispatch everything that was required. The carriers managed to deliver everything. I think, you know, what we've seen now from the Office of National Statistics, and, you know, the percentage of e-com sales as retail, and I think in November that was just over 36%, dipped a little in December, but significantly it's 10% higher than it was throughout 2019 as well. So I think just massive change. I think, you know, the final 2 points I would say that happened last year as well, I think that the pandemic forced people to switch to online shopping as well, and look at e-commerce providers. Some of that may have been around food and essential services as people were self-isolating, but I think clearly as well, that's now become a habit as well. I think people welcome the convenience that online and e-commerce provides. I think the final thing that sticks out for me as well is just recognizing that, you know, how well we did last year as an industry in supporting the e-com demand. You start thinking, you know, how challenging and difficult the pandemic may have been to cope with if we didn't have such an established e-com industry to pick up on the demand when shops were closed as well. So I think that probably is for me just really, you know, to the start, the supercharging, how well e-commerce coped, the retailers managing to pick all the volumes, the carriers doing a fantastic delivery performance throughout the year as well.
Yeah. And then managing peak on peak. Just on that point of supercharging the economy, you're absolutely right. I think we went into the first lockdown was in April, if you remember, and by May, a month later, online sales in the UK had hit a 10-year high. That was the report from Capgemini and IMRG. And certainly, you know, that sort of continued throughout the year, you know, month on month. US retailers saw a 68% increase, you know, year on year in that same period. So supercharge, I think, is a really good way of explaining it.
So it's been a busy year last year. So what we really want to know is, what can we learn from last year going into 2021? Obviously, most of the UK, in fact, all of the UK is still in lockdown, and much of Europe is in lockdown in one form or another. with 6 p.m. curfews, 9 p.m. curfews, depending on countries. So what can we learn? What should we be looking out for, especially in the next couple of months, based on what happened last year?
Yeah, I think the first thing we've got to recognise is almost celebrate the success of last year as well. I think the experience we gained last year will stand us in really good stead. I think the planning that went into peak was exceptional. I think what we saw through peak as well was the best performing peak ever for retailers and carriers alike. I think from the carriers as well, we've seen a fundamental switch that was forced upon them from safe distancing regulations as well, and the adoption of contactless delivery. And I think what that led to as well is around the adoption of photographs as a POD. So I guess it's becoming a lot more common now that instead of a signature on a screen that is nigh on illegible or a line, that people, through the use of geo-coordinates, are now seeing their front door with a parcel inside their front door as well. So I think that technology adoption that the pandemic has forced upon us, I think will last long into the future as well. I think the other thing we saw that will become a way of life as well is that the carriers did have to force some quite strict peak capacity volumes. At times, and certainly around the peak period, there was more volume going into the carrier networks than there was capacity at the time. And that's not because the carriers have announced significant investments. I think all the main ones have announced significant hub investments coming online in the next 12 to 18 months. So the planning and development is there. I think this aligns to the fact that the volume accelerated so quickly, the infrastructure is not quite in place. I think the key challenge we have and face is around the individual spikes in volume. So if we look across a lot of our customers, and certainly the marketplace sellers as well, Monday definitely is a huge spike in volume as the consumers are ordering over the Saturday and Sunday. It needs to be picked on and dispatched on a Monday. And we're seeing typically for some customers sort of 30-35% volume needing to be shipped on a Monday, and that dropping off to 12 and 15% towards the Friday as well. And ironically, Monday as a delivery day for the carrier is actually a reasonably good delivery day because they don't have the volume because of the low pickup on a Thursday. So I think what we will have to see is, and the successful retailers last year really did start to support the carriers on weekend collections as well. So actually starting to flatten down that 35% on a Monday by taking 15% of the volume on a Saturday. And I think what we've seen from our own research with GFS Checkout is that when consumers are given a choice of delivery, most people will opt for a Friday or Saturday delivery for convenience for them. It's not necessarily they need the goods they ordered the weekend on a Tuesday or Wednesday. So I think it's just trying to balance that working week and cope with the capacity. So, where we saw over the cyber weeks, some caps going in from some carriers around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is trying to flatten that week and work with the carriers to manage the volume over the week, because the capacity is there across the week. It's just those individual days where there's a challenge. And I know Bobbie will touch on this a little later. I think for me, forecasting has become ever more critical. I think the forecasting has to happen by day, by service. We saw at the end of, as we get close to the Christmas promise, that people do want to switch service from either road to air or from a 2-day service to a next day service as well. So having that plan in place with the carriers so this capacity is great. We touched on the early collection volume. Some carriers will collect the volume as long as available earlier in the day or weekend. I think as well, it's managing some of the best examples we saw last year were retailers that were messaging their own customers about the challenge of COVID around potential delays to pick and pack, or setting very realistic expectations around when the goods would be packed and dispatched as well. And I think as well, what we saw is the carriers themselves, with all the in-flight messaging and options they've got, the carriers have really stepped up the game. So make sure you're taking advantage of all those features that the carriers will provide that give the retailer's customer the best knowledge about the parcel, allow in-flight diversions, allow management of the parcel to stop a sort of where is my parcel query being placed. I think finally as well for me is have a plan B. You know, service was absolutely fantastic last year. I think, you know, without calling out, there's a couple of articles in the press around some individual carriers who, you know, perhaps through no fault of their own with the pandemic, with illness across their network, but did see struggles in certain areas. And what you want to be able to do is recognise and have the capacity and capability to switch providers to mitigate that risk. And I think that really is it for me. You know, I think that the three key learnings would be around forecasting, around flexibility, and having that contingency plan.
And I think the next thing is obviously Brexit is going on, and this didn't really impact us too much last year, but we're 3 weeks in now. In fact, let's be honest, Brexit happened 2 years ago. It was voted for in 2016. We left the EU 2 years ago. Now we've got to the end of the transition agreement, and we're now into, thankfully, a free trade agreement was signed on, I think it was signed on Christmas Eve and became law in the UK on the 31st of December, early hours of the morning, the Queen signed off on it. But what have we seen in the kind of the first 3 weeks? How has e-commerce trade been impacted as the result of Brexit?
Yeah, I think everything you've said, Chris, I would concur with. I think, you know, for a lot of our customers, I think, you know, some customers had planned probably for the last 2 years around what they would do within Brexit with HS codes, with the ORNMs, all the things that now become common practice to us and accepted best practice. I think what we saw, and I'd agree, you know, for a referendum in June 2016 to get to Christmas Eve, I think what confused a lot of customers at the time as the trade and cooperation agreement was announced on Christmas Eve was that the advice, and the correct advice, is that UK goods can continue to be sold into the EU Customs Union without trades and tariffs. And that's true, and that's correct. I think a lot of people, and maybe it was because of the pressure of peak and the relief a deal had been done on Christmas Eve, assumed that meant things would continue in January as they had done in December. For us, and you know, in line with the leading carriers, we knew that the end of the transition period, as you referenced, marked a fundamental change, that thereafter customs declarations would always be required on any future trade deal with the EU. So for the last 2 years, you know, we've been advising our customers to get ready for the terms of a no-deal exit. Not because, you know, we either wanted one way or another for that to happen, but we knew that by preparing for no-deal exit, that would allow full customs declaration to be available from day one of shipping. I think what we saw then, because some people assumed it was a frictionless trade deal, there was a lot of confusion around VAT, around country of origin, and around the carrier fees that were being charged as well. So very quickly in that time, it was reminding customers that the fees we'd shared around clearance fees were still valid because the carriers were still performing the clearance. The duties and taxes fees were still valid, even though the VAT, it was only VAT being collected in some cases. The fees were still valid there. And I think then the thing that quickly emerged as well is where people saw delivered at place, the DAP service, traditionally DDU, as being a cheap option. It quickly emerged actually the receiver of the goods is still paying a fee, an admin fee to the carrier, as well as the VAT between €5 and €15 in some cases. So I think the huge challenge from the start was the cost that's going to impact us is significant. I think where we were lucky, you touched on, Chris, was, you know, the suspension to Northern Ireland was a huge relief. And I think that, you know, not having to submit declarations for Northern Ireland this first 3 months of the year is a massive boost and has allowed some people to get their systems ready. I think in terms,
I think it's also worth pointing out that we keep talking about this free trade deal, but for those that still haven't got their heads around it, it's free trade for goods manufactured in the UK or in the EU. But if you're simply importing goods from, obviously China's one of the biggest places we import from. If you're importing Chinese goods, that's not manufactured in the UK or the EU, so it's not covered under the free trade agreement. And I'm guessing tariffs, HS codes. Maybe you can let people know the difference there, David.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think anything sort of country of origin is critical. So anything below 150 euros that is not manufactured in the UK or EU customs zone, it is, tariffs will then be applied to that product based on the HS code, and that will be determined by the customs authority of the relevant tariff from that product, which might range from a 5% tariff to 15%. I think that there's certain products that sit outside. I suppose the obvious ones of alcohol and perfume and cigarettes, but equally different things like rubber products and tyres. Some of those that can be below 150 euros, tariffs are still applicable as well. So it really has been a real challenge for some retailers trying to work through.
I think that's a fair point in that even with the free deal, as we've seen, is not free as in terms of everything. Is that free movement of goods? There are rules and detail around that, but also what David quite picked out was that even if it's free trade, right, you still need to make the customs declarations, and I think that really created a lot of confusion. Logistics Today reported that just in the first week of trade, I think 20% of SMEs just stopped shipping to the EU, mainly around, confusion about what information was required to fill in, customs declarations, documents and what have you. Many parcels were being rejected by carriers, or even returned, rejected at border because they weren't able to get cleared. And in, worst case scenario, being sent back from, EU customers that really didn't want to be paying those extra fees that they suddenly were hit with.
So important, let the customers know up front that either they're going to be hit with fees or, as you said, David, arrange for delivery duty paid, where you pay the fees up front, and but obviously the carrier then makes a charge for actually handling those fees.
I think. Go on.
No, go on.
No, I think it's exactly right. I think it's been as transparent with customers as possible. I think what we've seen across Europe as well is it's important for even as consumers to realise where the product's actually being shipped from. It might be a brand name that you recognise, but if it's being shipped from a third party in France, we will be paying import duties in the UK on that product as well. So I think it's a challenge for everyone. I think in terms of wider volume, I think Bobbie's shared what's been seen across the wider industry. In some ways, there's a couple of other things in the mix as well. Obviously, there has been some carrier suspensions, as the teething problems you mentioned earlier around carrier compliance, around data entry into the chief system. I think you mentioned the products. I think the sanitary and phytosanitary products,
restricted goods,
cosmetics, the food, the pet food that can be shipped across border, from Great Britain to Republic of Ireland, has been a massive lane in the past, and products that move seamlessly now require licenses and paperwork, and some of the carriers have taken the decision to suspend those products. I think the next part we don't know is obviously there is a challenge on inbound flows from Asia as well. So we're seeing some customers still waiting for containers to arrive from Asia. That's impacting on international and UK sales as well. So I think probably too early to call the volume as yet. But I think what is clear, I think the retailers that have gone through a really steep learning curve. I think we're seeing now the third week compliance on the paperwork has improved dramatically. I think as people are now realising that this is not a carrier that's deciding whether an item can clear customs. It's the chief customs system that is processing it through, and if any part of it rejects, the shipment is simply sent back to you. So I think it has been a steep learning curve, and I think one that with a little bit more time and planning, and as you say, not being ratified on the 31st of December.
And David, let's not forget that. Yeah, and let's not forget that at the moment, it's early days, so the focus now is on getting parcels across the borders. But don't forget when with returns as well, there's going to be, declarations on returns as well that need to be done. So soon we're going to be hit with returns, parcels coming the other way, inbound parcels.
Yeah.
So, Bobbie, what I'd really like is some real core advice for sellers, especially marketplace sellers and small businesses that have been selling to the EU and are now running into these problems. We've talked a lot about the issues, but what are the solutions? How can these sellers actually get their goods to the EU and carry on selling successfully?
We're going to touch on how we're seeing some of our customers sort of respond, what options they're finding to overcome the Brexit problem. But in our experience, there are basically 4 principles, what we call for having a solid delivery and return strategy. We've packaged it up in the 4-point action plan for successful delivery in 2021. We're going to be making this available to all the listeners today after the webinar. So they don't need to be concerned about taking notes. So the 4 principles, the first one is, and David mentioned it at the beginning, is you need to have contingency. We experience a lot of issues around capacity at the last minute, and where we saw customers, retailers winning were the ones that were working with multiple carriers, and could easily switch from one carrier to another if there was an issue. So having a multi-carrier approach, having a backup plan requires, also having flexibility to be able to not just, to set those services up, but also to be able to switch them on at the checkout at very short notice. That really helps. So first and foremost, have a multi-carrier approach. Now, you may argue, but everybody works with multiple carriers. In our world, we talk about multi-carrier, meaning rather than working with multiple carriers, which, multiplies the complexity and the overhead and also splits your budget across multiple carriers, we always think about find a single partner that is multi-carrier, to make that a more simple approach, so you get the best of contingency and flexibility when you need it, but without having that overhead and that burden of working with having to manage multiple carrier relationships. So a single multi-carrier partner that will also give you that contingency and ability to switch when you need it. The next thing is, just as you could be working with multiple carriers and services, we see a lot of issues when it comes to integrating those services into retailers' platforms, dispatch platforms. So look for technology, an end-to-end suite, if you like, that will help streamline and automate everything from checkout to doorstep. So whether it's one platform for multi-carrier labeling, one platform that enables customers to choose a delivery option across your multiple carriers, one platform that will easily give your internal teams easy visibility of being able to track and trace parcels without having to switch across multiple screens, and a platform that's going to not only make it easier, but also enable you to scale more easily as well as volumes go up, but equally as, you can scale down as well. So look for how you can make your own operational processes more efficient, and to support a multi-carrier approach as well. The third one is, make sure that you've got your delivery set up right for shipping to the EU and rest of world. The key takeaways from that, I think, David mentioned one of them was, give customers choice of delivery options. Operationally, it will help, flatten out some of those peaks and troughs, but fundamentally, from a customer experience perspective, you need to be able to offer your customers, whether they're in the EU, at home, or anywhere else in the world, a choice of options, so that they can pick the ones that's most convenient for them. But there's also a commercial decision around that as well, because you need to get the right mix of carriers, right mix of delivery partners that will help you, that's right for your customers, but also right for your budget. Duties and taxes, that's pretty much unavoidable now. So look for additional technology, some kind of duties and taxes calculator that can be used at checkout, so that when your customer does come to purchase what's in their basket, you can give them full visibility of either DDP, give them DDP pricing, so delivery duty paid pricing, or you can offer them delivery at place pricing, so that they can choose whether they want to pay the duties and taxes up front or when they receive the goods. And ensure that your dispatch systems are set up for paperless trade. So, it's the paperwork that has to be done now. If it's going to be much easier if you are confident that your systems can capture the mandatory data that's required for customs clearance, so EORI number, harmonization code, place of origin, etc. If that can be captured straight into your systems, and then that information can be shared digitally, electronically with your carriers and with customs, paperless trade as we call it. And make sure that the partners that you are working with, your delivery partners, really are keeping, not just up to date, but one step ahead of what the changes are, because they're going to be changing throughout the year, and so that you're not going to come across any hiccups in your dispatch. I mentioned up front that it's not just about, right now we're all focusing on parcels getting across the border, but at some point we're going to be hit with returns, so parcels coming back the other way. So again, reduce the operational burden of having to manage returns by being able to look at having online portals to enable customers to go online, make a return online. Everything's done digitally. The advantage of that, of course, is that as a business, it gives you early visibility of what's being returned. So your warehouse teams have got upfront visibility of what's going to come, what's heading their way, what's going to be returned into stock faster. It also will automate things like duty relief, so making sure that any required paperwork is also produced at the same time. And, let's be kind to the environment. It's going to eliminate the need for returns labels and returns, physical paper waste.
So I've got to ask Bobbie, before we move on, whose fault is all this? Obviously, half the country voted for Brexit, so you can blame them.
Yeah.
But then the government should have told us what to do. The carriers, surely they shouldn't be letting us ship a parcel without the correct paperwork. And come on, it's the retailer's business. They've got to own the problem. And then there's people in the middle that do the carrier management for us. It's probably, I'm asking the wrong question. Whose fault is it? What I should be asking is, who's in a position to give the retailers the most help to get this right?
Oh my gosh, that's a really big question.
Is it the carrier? Is it the carrier management system? Is it the retailer should be doing it themselves and should magically know what they should be doing? If someone needs help, where can they go?
First of all, let's be honest. Fundamentally, if it's your business, it's your responsibility. Right? Because even if something goes wrong and you can pass the blame on to somebody else, what you don't want to do is either lose that sale or lose that customer. So fundamentally, you need to be confident that the team you have around you, that means the technology platform you're using. So your e-commerce provider, if you're Shopify, whatever systems you're using, you need to have done the due diligence beforehand to make sure that you're clear about what they were doing to make sure that their platforms and systems were Brexit ready. Similarly, do the due diligence with the carriers you're working with to understand how ready are they? Do they, are you confident that they're clear about what those changes are? Are you clear about what information you need to provide to them and how you're going to provide that? You know, it's a chain, isn't it? It's an end-to-end chain, and all those different links have got to be joined up together. It's a lot of what we've been doing with our customers over the past 2 years since we made the decision to leave the EU, was taking our customers through the due diligence of looking first at their carrier mix. Do they have the right carrier mix? You've been working very closely with all the carriers in our industry to understand what their plans are, so that, you know, we can be confident that nothing's going to fall through the cracks. Similarly with e-commerce providers that our systems integrate with, to understand how ready they're going to be to help customers navigate what is really complicated. So I don't think there's anybody here can be blamed. There is no blame. I think we found ourselves in a situation where there was information coming through that was either not complete, incorrect, or too late. Human nature. Some businesses were more proactive in, you know, taking the bull by the horns and making a decision whether that, you know, to prepare for worst case scenario. Let's be honest. The government, right from the outset, have been saying to businesses, prepare for worst case scenario, prepare for trading under WTO. And even with the best will in the world, there's going to come up, you know, things are still evolving, and we will still be seeing change coming through as there's more clarity around what the Brexit deal means, as we set up new deals as well with other countries. COVID is not going away, so that's going to, you know, have an impact on everything. So it really comes back to what David mentioned up front, in that even you need to be prepared, you need to be very good with your forecasting, with your planning, be proactive, but you have to have that plan B, because there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead as we look across 2021.
So we'll make sure that everyone listening today gets emailed that 4-point plan for starters.
Yes.
At the end of the webinar. But what do you see, and probably one for you, David, what do you see as the biggest single issue for online sellers after we've got through the initial teething problems? Obviously thinking in 6 months, 9 months, this time next year, what's going to be the biggest ongoing challenge for sellers?
I think ultimately it comes down to cost. You know, the market and the consumers are still there in Europe. There's still demand for the products. It's whether, because of the increased back office costs, the admin costs, and because the direct costs as well, with the clearance fees, the duties and taxes fees, in most cases, you know, as a rough rule of thumb, you're probably doubling your old delivery cost to provide the same service in January to the same customer that was ordering from you in December. I think you've then got the double whammy. You know, that increased cost can't be absorbed. It has to be passed on as in the selling price, and the risk is then that it's no longer a worthwhile purchase for the European consumer to order from the UK or GB based retailer anymore. So I think, to me, that's the real challenge. We've seen, say, the admin costs still. You know, we've got different products and licenses. We touched on earlier around the sanitary and phytosanitary, the licensing requirements, the costs there. I think they all come in, but I think everything has now just added cost and complexity. And I think, you know, the one-stop shop, and I think to your last question about, you know, what caused it, I think, you know, the timing for me hasn't helped. You know, I think if you learn from your mistakes, I think we've, as an industry, we've all got up to speed very, very quickly. I think, you know, if the deal had been announced in November and people could run test shipments, comply, it would have been a lot easier, and people would have digested the rules. I think, you know, where we found ourselves was, even on New Year's Eve, there was still lack of clarity over shipments going to Northern Ireland, and the carrier specification and labelling could be used. So I think that the timing hasn't helped, but I suppose the current challenge I've got, you know, for me, unless you adopt a different practice the costs aren't going to go away. The carriers are still going to pass on the clearance fees. The duties and taxes fees are still going to apply. I think there's a hope that the one-stop shop on 1st of July will provide a level of support. But again, is that going to mitigate the carrier costs? Not 100%.
Yeah.
So, David, you're talking about this as a big challenge, and it is a challenge when you tell someone, oh, the cost to get a delivery to Europe has probably just doubled. Give me some practical options, some ideas, some things I could do. How can I actually mitigate some of these costs? What are UK businesses doing to solve this problem? What can I do for my business?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of factors. And we touched on, Bobbie mentioned earlier, some of them have just taken a rain check for January to fix their own systems, make sure they're compliant before they start shipping. I think others, perhaps again, we talk about the sanitary and phytosanitary have just not been able to ship. They don't have the license. They're shipping food products. I think what we're seeing, and we have seen previously with the most innovative customers, is recognise there is a huge opportunity still within Europe and wider international. And those that perhaps don't have the bandwidth, the technology, the capacity to take advantage of the situation may actually stop shipping. So some of our customers have already chosen through last year to relocate to the Netherlands in most cases for our customers. So by the end of this week, we'll have 4 customers shipping at a facility in the Netherlands and distributing across Europe there. So again, that's getting them closer to the customers in terms of delivery time, but helping to avoid all the additional fees from carriers to provide the services there. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more businesses look at how they can exploit having a footprint within Europe rather than just walk away and miss the sales, because in some cases, the internationals, it's a significant part of their turnover, their profit. They can't just simply turn it off and walk away.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, David. I think what we've seen currently are the initial teething problems. What paperwork do we need? All the sort of the detail around it, and eventually that's all going to get smoothed over. But one thing that's not going to go away is the cost, the increased cost of cross-border shipping, and that's going to have a fundamental impact on competitiveness of EU exports. So whether you're a marketplace seller, or whether you are selling from your website, you're selling high value goods, that's still going to have a high impact. And if you've got low value goods, then your margins are so tight already. You've got a big commercial decision to make. What are you going to do with that extra cost? Are you going to pass it on to the customer? Are you going to, is it going to hit your bottom line? It's really tough. So the focus is very much going to be around how do we reduce the cost of cross-border shipping, and what are the options for that? So whether you temporarily stop doing it, whether you continue BAU and in terms of you're based in the UK, you're going to ship, export and import from the UK, or whether, as we're seeing, a much stronger growing trend of businesses that are looking at how they can be relocating and using, third-party facilities, such as we've just set up, to be able to reduce the cost of shipping and get closer to their customers.
And as an example there as well, Chris, what we're seeing with the customers who are shipping from the Netherlands now, it's actually, Great Britain to Republic of Ireland is a huge trade lane. It's actually proving more cost effective now to send parcels from the Netherlands into the Republic of Ireland. So obviously the shipments drive straight through England and Wales on the way to Republic of Ireland, but it's a 20-30% lower cost in doing it that way than shipping directly from GB.
Yeah. And certainly using locating part of, using an EU-based facility, not only for intra-EU, fulfilling orders, shipping in and out across the EU, but also into Northern Ireland and rest of world. There's no reason why you can't be, shipping from EU to the rest of the world as well.
I think as well, Bobbie, I mean, we touched on around the returns. It solves the problem of returns as well, that you've got a seamless process then to return it to an EU destination. You're not having to worry about import duty relief around carrier capability to collect the shipment. So I think the add-on benefits just grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah, I think once you've made that leap, if it's right for the individual's business, I think it is a base to grow and expand internationally in the future as well.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is the affordability, the feasibility of that based on, the size of your business and what makes sense for you.
Yeah, and I've got to ask the obvious question, because it does sound hellishly expensive setting up a brand new business in Europe. So GFS have got GFS Europe. Tell us a bit about how GFS Europe can help merchants actually trade from Europe. What can you do for us?
Well, GFS Europe we've now got, as David said, we've now got customers moving into, using our GFS Europe facilities. So that means that we can provide warehousing, fulfillment. From there, we can also ship to the end customer within Europe or even rest of world, Northern Ireland, as David mentioned. We can also manage returns, and consolidate returns back to the UK if that's a more cost-effective way of doing it, and also making sure that we still provide that range of services, that delivery options that EU customers expect, whether that is next day or whether that's collecting from one of 40,000 click and collect locations across the EU. But we have to be clear, this is not perhaps a solution that's suitable for everyone. This is you still need to be looking at businesses that are shipping, say, 20 plus orders, parcels a day for this to be feasible for your business.
So there's still a cost benefit balance to be made. And this is something that you need a little bit of scale to be able to do.
You need a little bit of scale. So 20 plus parcels, which, I would say there's not a lot these days. However, if we've got, our facilities can make it cost effective because of, the more businesses we've got in there that are shipping, then we've got economies of scale. The alternative is that, you have to go and find your own facilities. So obviously looking for a partner, whether that's GFS Europe or a similar partner based within Europe, means that you haven't got that upfront investment. It's something that you're going to be able to do relatively quickly. And if you don't like it, you can quickly pull out and, move to a different solution. Or maybe once you've outgrown that solution, you then look to, invest, find a different way of fulfilling that need. But having a partner that can provide that range of services means that you can get into Europe quickly, in a low risk way. They should also be able to give you that flexibility so that you can pick and choose whether you just want them for warehousing or whether you want them to do the full thing from, pick, pack, dispatch, deliver, return. It does provide businesses with a cost-effective, flexible solution. But like I said, you do need to be at least 20 parcels plus to make this a feasible solution for you.
Yeah. So let me just get this straight in my head. You're saying put stock into a warehouse in Europe, of which GFS is an option. Would that mean that when I move my stock into the EU, that's when I pay the tariffs in bulk on all of my stock that I'm moving across, and then there's no duties to pay when it's delivered to EU customers?
In that scenario, yeah, it depends whether you're registered in a specific company. But yeah,
where you're registered.
That would be the logic that once you've cleared customs into the EU customs zone, you are then shipping, on the terms that we enjoyed in 2020.
Yeah.
So the carrier clearance fees don't apply intra-Europe. The VAT payment fees don't apply intra-Europe. Obviously, the one-stop shop from the 1st of July will change those rules again slightly, but a lot of the administration fees will be avoided instantly. If you think you're selling goods to the value of sort of 40, 50 euros, it really could be the difference between actually being able to make a profit on that sale or losing the sale entirely. And I think in some ways it's almost the opportunity of cost, of not doing it. How much business are you actually going to lose out on?
Yeah.
And equally, obviously there's still huge demand in Europe for UK products and the quality that we provide. So I think it's seeing that growth opportunity as others perhaps don't sort of grab hold of the nettle and take the initiative. Say the consumers are still there, the demand is still there.
Yeah.
And is this something that you could grow with? Should I start with a couple of my best sellers that I regularly sell into Europe, or is this something I need to put all of my stock in from day one?
I think it's flexible for how the individual wants to work. Obviously, depending on the value of the goods that you're shipping, there doesn't have to be a long-term 3-year contract with penalties. So, I think it depends on the individual and the key lanes that they want to try this on. But I think, as Bobbie said, unless you're sending sort of 20 plus shipments per day, the costs of getting the admin and the warehouse support will probably outweigh the carrier fee that you would otherwise pay. So it becomes that sort of tipping point and break even.
Yeah.
So this is definitely something for those that are growing. Now, I've got a couple of really on-point questions come in from our readers. And the first one is Amazon have put out an edict that if you're selling to Europe, or in fact, if you're selling to any customer in any country, the goods have got to be delivered for the price the customer pays. So if I buy something on Amazon Germany and I live in Germany and a UK seller ships it to me, there can't be any tariffs or duties collected when the item's delivered to me. Now, this is especially a problem for people shipping low-cost goods that they now need to get delivered to Europe, delivery duty paid. So they need to give the carrier the duty up front, let the carrier clear customs and deliver to the end customer with no charge to the end customer. How can we ship low-value goods in this manner that Amazon are now requiring?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. Obviously, the solution we spoke about a minute ago around actually avoiding the cost by having the goods already in Europe is the ultimate solution. I think really you've got to start looking at deferred services. All the express providers that can get it into Germany in 1 or 2 days provide great service, but the admin fees on a low-cost product will simply make it not sustainable. So I think you're going to have to be looking at deferred services, sort of mail type products. The GFS International solution that we provide as a duties and taxes paid service does provide something similar, slightly longer than an express provider, but a cost-effective solution for those low-value goods.
So a more cost-effective solution, and the only sacrifice is it'll take a couple of days extra to arrive.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
That sounds like a good plan, and a real lifesaver for those people who are selling low-cost goods.
Yeah. And don't forget, manage customer expectations. I think that there's nothing wrong with make sure it's clear what your delivery policy is. What the transit times are going to be, so that customers know up front, what to expect when their parcel is going to arrive.
And we've got one final question, because we are running out of time. And the question is, if I'm a small business, is it cost effective to use EU fulfillment? So what they're saying is, obviously, there's going to be some costs because the fulfillment house, whether it be GFS or someone else, will have charges. They're going to have more stock because now they've got to put some stock in the EU, some in the UK. There'll still be import tariffs into the EU to pay. Is it going to be cost effective, or can you give any guidance on when you think, okay, yes, this business should go for it, or this business is just too small to try EU fulfillment?
Yeah, I think we touched on earlier, I suppose, I sort of set the rule of thumb at 20, but I guess each business is unique. So depending where you're importing the goods from, it may be, as you touched on earlier with rules of origin, that the EU has a trade deal with a country that you're importing from in Asia. But, you know, as we said earlier, the trade deal that we've got, the trade and cooperation agreement, is bilateral. It doesn't run diagonal. So if the EU has a trade deal with an Asian country, you can then import into the EU, potentially tariff trade free for the goods there. I think it depends then on the value of the goods that you're shipping. So if the average selling price is €20 and you've got 20 of them and it's a low margin, or you're selling at €100, it's high margin. So I think there's unique circumstances for each customer. But I think if you have the volume, and said, you know, probably around 20 international shipments leaving UK each day to go into Europe, I think it's probably worth having a conversation, looking at the opportunities, if not for today, to see how that sales plan can be accelerated in the future as well.
I think definitely have the conversation, because until you've had the conversation, every situation is unique. Have the conversation to understand what your options are for today and maybe further down the line. You gave the example, Chris, of a business that you said they have to have some stock in the UK, and then, you know, they want to move some, you know, split that and have some based in the EU. It might be that through better discussion, you actually realize that it's more cost effective and efficient to consolidate everything in the EU. You know, it's worth having the conversation.
Fantastic. I want to thank you for your time today, but also before we close, I believe you've got two things that we will be sending everyone that's listening to the webinar today. And if you're watching this on YouTube in a week's time, we'll make sure the links are there as well for you.
Yeah. So
the GFS 4-point action plan for delivery in 2021 that you mentioned earlier, but also the GFS Post-Brexit Survival Guide. We'll email that. Can you just let us know what's in the Post-Brexit Survival Guide?
It's just a handy summary of where we are at the moment in terms of what the rules are for, you know, for customs clearance, etc. It's just putting everything consolidating everything into just a little handy guide.
So we'll make sure that's emailed out to everyone.
Yeah.
So in summary, then, it has got more complicated shipping to the EU due to Brexit. And incidentally, if you're in the EU shipping to the UK, that's just as complicated nowadays. But there are options out there, one of which is GFS Europe and actually using a European warehouse. And I think it's quite encouraging that you're saying 20 orders a day makes this worth considering, because that's actually quite a low threshold for a lot of sellers. I was thinking you'd be saying, like, oh, you've got to be doing sort of 500 orders a day or 1,000 orders a day to make it cost effective. So looking at 20 orders a day, that does bring it into the realms of possibility for a lot of people. So we've got the email address online on the screen there, salesinquiries@gfsdeliver.com, if you want to find out more from GFS. But David and Bobbie, I really want to thank you for your time today. It is a very, very confusing and complex period in the life of most e-commerce merchants. So thanks for cutting through some of the red tape. And I hope we'll get you back in the near future to give us another update. So thank you, David. Thank you, Bobbie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.